Okay, so we're good to go. Welcome, everyone. This is the Quant University AI Fall School, the second lecture of the Quant University AI Fall School. Today, we have the pleasure of inviting back Jacob Kosoff, who leads many of the Gen AI and data science projects at Bank of America. Jacob and I, we have known each other for many, many years, since he was the head of model risk at Regions Bank. And now he's kind of taken on the reins of a much larger bank. Jacob, I'm going to ask you an AI question. Maybe you can ask your AI chatbot to answer this question. Like, why did it take so long for the bank transfer at Bank of America when I did a transfer yesterday to happen? So maybe you can, pull up all your records and give me the information. Maybe you have all my accounts at your fingertips now with all your chatbot and other things. But all jokes aside, it's always a pleasure to host these sessions. Last week, we had Augusto Gianto, who presented his framework on Gen AI validation. And our hope is that in the last few years, we have seen so many innovations in artificial intelligence. And the financial industry, as you all know, has been in the forefront of not only adopting AI products, but also doing it in a rigorous and a responsible way. Just because we have the fiduciary responsibility of making sure that whatever we bring in as technology to either enhance our workflows, but also to make sure that we can bring in all the latest and greatest technologies to our customer base. We do it in a responsible way, and we do the rigorous testing. We make sure that the products work as expected, and we also want to make sure that we bring in the best practice to the world so that we adopt it as a standard. That way, when we leverage these best practices, it doesn't become something which becomes like these siloed architectures. So in that realm, at Quant University, we are actively working with professionals and organizations to understand their use cases and also to provide guidance and best practices on how to adopt these technologies in a responsible way. So for people who are joining in for the first time, welcome to the Quant University sessions. And we've been doing these sessions for many years now. And every time we do it, we learn a lot. And we also try to share what we have learned with audience. So that's why we are streaming these sessions online over Zoom and on YouTube. And if you go to www.qu.academy, that's where we share all our recordings. So you will be able to access the slides and the recording for today's session later. So let me do a quick share of my slides. I had a few announcements before I can hand over the slides, the reins to Jacob. So for people who don't know me, excuse me, I started Quant University 10 years ago, and it was one of those, I don't know how many know the story. I used to lead financial services consulting at a company called MathWorks, wherein I did a lot of MATLAB modeling before AI and data science was cool. I used to live and breathe models for 5+ years, and I was working with quantitative financial hedge fund, and I was teaching them some of the optimization techniques, best practices. And when I was doing that, one of the hedge fund analysts who I was working with told me, like, well, I wish there was a school for quants. I wish there was a place where we can go and learn these techniques without having to go and get another MBA or another degree. And then I came back to my hotel room and put in a search on GoDaddy, www.quantuniversity.com. And GoDaddy gave me an offer saying, if you register this domain in the next 10 minutes, you can buy it for $1. I said, I'm going to park this domain for $1, and I saved it. And then in 2013, when I left MathWorks and I wanted to start my own consulting company, obviously I didn't have any funding. So I was basically making sure that my bedroom was my office. All the notes I had was reusable. And then when it came down to setting up my website, I said, well, I already have a parked website called Quant University, so let me do that. So that's how the www.quantuniversity.com got started. I thought I'll share the story because it's been more than 10 years since we started this company. And I still remember the dollar I spent 10 years ago to start this company. Since then, we have worked with a large number of companies. We actively work with retirement systems and federal organizations to help them with upskilling and cross-skilling on various disciplines, primarily the intersection of AI and machine learning. In addition, I also have a faculty position at Northeastern University. I teach in the Master's in Information Systems program and also in the FinTech and the MBA programs there. So I'm teaching a course on FinTech next year, and currently I'm teaching a course on big data. And I'm also working on a book on artificial intelligence and risk management, which is going to come out later this year, but it's been in the works for the past 2 years. For people who are interested in joining our sessions, there are a couple more sessions coming up for guest lectures, but we're also doing 3 workshops, one in October, one in November, and one in December, primarily to gear financial professionals on the soup to nuts of what does it take to build a complete artificial intelligence application. So it's geared towards financial professionals. The first one is going to happen in October, later in October, and one in November and December. If you are interested in knowing more about this program, please send an email to info@qsandbox.com. It's held in a hybrid mode. We are planning to do the October session in Boston and hybrid over Zoom, November in New York, and December in Washington, D.C. So stay tuned for details, and if you're interested, please send an email to info@qsandbox.com. In addition, next week, we are doing a half-a-day workshop for the Boston FinTech Week. It's going to be on October 18th between 9 and 12, held primarily in Boston, but also streamed online. So if you're interested, go to the website or QR code and you can register. It's completely complimentary, and we have an amazing group of panelists joining us. Anish from Fidelity, Arun Verma, who heads quantitative research at Bloomberg, so he's going to be one of the panelists. And then D. Sharawat, who has been like a pioneer in terms of research on various frontier products. So he's going to provide his take on fintech. He's at Rosenblatt. And we also have a masterclass primarily focused on Gen AI, and we're going to primarily touch on agentic architectures, on what does it mean to adopt agentic architectures within the financial enterprise. So that's a session which is happening October 18th. So if you're looking for something to learn on Friday next week, here's a session to go for. And as I mentioned, these are some of the details for the session. And before I hand over the stage to Jacob, I just want to mention that we are going to do weekly lectures. Next week, as I mentioned, is the half-a-day workshop. And then we have a session on AI and security with Apostle, who has written a really cool paper with Alina and others from Northeastern. He's at NIST. And then in November, Kosoff and Julia, who are TD and State Street, they're going to be presenting a topic on AI governance. And Uday Kamath recently wrote a book on large language models, and he's at Smarsh, and he's going to be having a topic on AI metrics. And we have a couple more sessions coming up. But I thought I'll just put this on the radar for you if you're interested in joining these weekly sessions. And if you're interested, send an email to info@qsandbox.com for more details. That said, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And Jacob, the stage is all yours. And before I hand over the stage to Jacob, I just want to briefly introduce Jacob. As I mentioned, Jacob and I, we have known a long time, and I always enjoy my conversations with Jacob. But formally, Jacob is a data science and model development executive at Bank of America, where he leads data science for technology, risk, and operations, advancing data science and AI capabilities within Bank of America with a special focus on generative AI. Before joining Bank of America, Jacob was the head of model risk at Regions Bank for 8 years, where he managed model governance, validation, and AI risk teams. He has 20 plus years of experience in financial services. Come on, Jacob, come on, just 20 years? And I thought you've been doing it since birth. And he has worked at PNC, Freddie Mac, Genesis Analytics. He's a thought leader and frequent contributor to the American Banker, and was named top 40 under 40 leader in the industry. Thank you so much, Jacob, for taking time and talking about Gen AI and all the topics you've been working on. And I welcome you to the stage, and please take it away.
Well, thank you, Sri. I'm very excited to be here. Thank you for running Quant University. I find it extremely valuable. My teammates and colleagues find it very valuable. So thank you so much for running Quant University. It's been very helpful for us. As Sri mentioned, a little bit about me. I started in model development, then moved over to model validation, eventually became the head of model risk at Regions Bank. Really enjoyed that there for 8 years. really having a great opportunity to interact with various models, and then of course newer AI models, but most importantly working with a phenomenal group of people back at Regions, and I see a few of them are on the call, so hello. So really enjoyed that, and then very lucky to move over to Bank of America about 2.5 years ago into a data science role. And again, getting to work with fantastic people, fantastic data scientists, a lot of experienced data scientists. And there are many, many data science leaders at Bank of America, a lot of great talent. My team is just one of many teams, a great team, a wonderful team. But there are many areas of the bank doing pretty interesting stuff. Also, I want to say all the views I express here are mine and are not necessarily those reflections of any financial institution. Second, any examples I use are not specific to any financial institution. They're not specific to Bank of America. Rather, this is what I've pulled together through my conversations with leaders at large U.S. financial institutions. So think banks above $100 billion in assets, all the way to those that are in the trillions, and kind of what they're seeing and what they're doing. And so most of what I'll be talking about are live proofs of concept, as well as some in full production at large U.S. financial institutions. So one, what I'm saying is not reflecting any one bank, it's not reflecting Bank of America, and I'm speaking only from my own views and aggregation of what I've seen. All right, with that, I will share my screen. Let's see if that works. All right, can you see my screen, Sri?
Yes, perfectly, Jacob.
Okay, beautiful, wonderful. So, good. So first, and I only have just 2 slides here, but I want to also leave a lot of time for questions. So as banks, financial institutions are using AI here in this 4th quarter, it's not to say, oh, wow, great, we have some AI, we have generative AI, let's go try to use it wherever we can. What you're seeing at large financial institutions is really taking a use case first and saying, where are there difficult processes? Where are there mundane processes? Where are there processes where we could use some tools to make it more effective and efficient? And what you're seeing at most U.S. financial institutions is that the output is designed to help the employee experience. That's it, to help the employee experience. It's not necessarily to be customer facing, and very few large financial institutions have generative AI that are directly customer facing. In most cases, what you're seeing today in October of 2024 are tools, are co-pilots, are assistants designed to help a line of business employee, a subject matter, make a better decision, right? And so that's what you're seeing. In the future, this can change for sure, but what are you seeing today at the end of 2024 is the use of generative AI, both in proofs of concept as well as in full production, designed to assist an employee. What you're seeing is that the output of generative AI is not an auto decision, is not going to the customer, is not going to other stakeholders. It is going to an internal employee. And what you're seeing across all large financial institutions is that the employee is designed to be mindful of complacency risk, to be mindful of any weaknesses and limitations of the model, and be weaknesses and limitations of the output, and to challenge it. And sometimes the output is correct, sometimes it's wrong, sometimes it's right, but maybe it's not the right thing to say. And so what we're seeing across financial institutions is a real desire to, one, how can we use these tools to improve the work lives of our employees, to help them be more effective, to help them to be more efficient, to help them enjoy their work. When you think about employee surveys, right, across financial institutions, you'll see people say, well, my work might be boring, my work might be mundane. Is there a way to automate some of the easier tasks? And this is one aspect that's driving it. And so when we think through where you're seeing generative AI today in large financial institutions, one is this idea, and I'd say, if you think of the 10 largest banks in the US, I'd say from my conversations, like 6 to 7 of them use this kind of categorization. Not all, but I'd say 6 to 7 use this idea of kind of this 3 buckets. One has 4 buckets. We'll just use the plurality here of the 3 buckets of classifying content, summarizing content, and generating content. So first is classifying content, right? So was a customer conversation was as a complaint or not. And many financial institutions, especially if, remember a few years ago, Wells Fargo was in the news for some checking accounts that were open, maybe without some customers' permission. And so after that, what some firms did was saying, we really need to get an early warning on this. We really want to understand what our customers are saying. Even if it's not technically fully a complaint, we want to hear that if there's a concern that accounts are opened or a concern about anything, we really want to hear this. So for the last few years, most financial institutions have really added a new task to those customer service representatives, to those employees in the contact center. Now, when you're talking with a customer, really understand their concerns and really understand if it's a complaint. And we want to, in a clear methodology, classify those complaints. Credit card lost, credit card stolen, fraudulent transaction, card not working overseas, ATM did not return card. And financial institutions want to aggregate that up to see, oh my goodness, in this geography, we're having more cards lost. In this geography, we're having more fraudulent transactions. Or at this branch, the customers are complaining that it's closed or there's a problem in this branch. And so we want to, this is all pre-Gen AI, financial institutions, their leadership want to classify complaints, understand complaints. And so what's the current process right now for most financial institutions? A customer calls in and the employee really has two options. They can multitask and try to write down the complaint, just type it free form, as well as having to click a box, maybe a preset definition of card lost, card stolen. They could do that while they're talking to the customer and trying to resolve the customer's problem. But then they're multitasking, and hope none of you are. If you are, I can see you. Stop multitasking. All right, thank you. No, but the employee could be multitasking, which isn't giving the customer the full time and attention. Or the customer can the employee could be using valuable time after the call and using a lot of time trying to type up a summary and identify the complaint. And so one thing that you're seeing among well over half of the largest financial institutions is trying to use some generative AI to take a transcript of a call. They use some metadata too, but we'll just make it simple. Take the transcript of the call in stereo, so they have the employees' voices captured and transcribed as well as the customer. And from that transcript to identify if there's a complaint. Is it a complaint? Yes or no? And this is something various generative AI tools are good at. And then within a complaint, what type of complaint is it? Let's classify. And now this either A, allows the employee to focus more on the customer, not have to type free form, and does not have to click a button on classifying the complaint, or it also saves the employee time at the end of the call if they were doing it at the end of the call. And additionally, it's not automatic. So what you're seeing at most financial institutions is that a draft output of the call summary, as well as the complaint classification goes to the employee. And the employee can click on a green check mark, say, yep, that's right, card lost. Or they can click on a red X and say, no, card wasn't lost. It was mailed to their grandma. Let me find a better category. There's this. And then when there's a draft summary, which will be useful if the call gets escalated, useful if the customer calls again later, useful for various enterprise independent testing or other testing of the call. There'll be a summary. What's useful there is that then that output goes to the employee and the employee can edit it and say, oh, no, that's not right. It transcribed it wrong. And again, the model's not going to be perfect, but one, if it's equal or maybe a little bit better than humans, it complements the human. There's some areas where the model will be better and it captures the complaint better. Some areas the human will be better, but combined as a team, the model and the human can help have a higher rate of complaint classification or complaint capture and complaint classification. And again, in this example, goes back to my earlier point, this is not designed to and will not replace human. It's rather going to either A, the human usually does it during the call, allows the employee to focus on the customer. And if the contact center employee does it after the call, it saves those valuable minutes, right? Saving 30 seconds, per hour across every contact center employee, that's a lot of time, or even 30 seconds every 20 minutes, whatever it might be. It does save, when you add it up, saves a considerable amount of time, allowing the employees to go back and focus on additional calls, as well as can help from a staffing point of view that you might be able to reduce future hiring. And so you plan on originally hiring 10 more people from the contact center. Maybe you only need to hire 9. Maybe you only need to hire 8. And so there can definitely be some of that benefit. So from talking with peers, I've never seen a firm say, okay, we're going to use this to do layoffs. I've not seen that. I don't think that's expected. Rather, you might see some natural, 10 people retire, they backfill 9. But really, it's designed to handle increased call volumes, especially those related to fraud. And so one idea, again, is that we're empowering the employee with a tool which can summarize the industry. Banks are empowering employees with a tool that's not perfect and not saying it's going to do your job for you, but it's going to help partially automate one task. Now, remember, when you call your bank for some help, there's many things the associate is helping you with. It's not just capturing your complaint. And so this is just one task of many that a contact center employee has to handle. And the spirit of what you're seeing in generative AI in the fourth quarter of 2024 is partial automation of specific tasks, not of jobs, but of specific tasks. And the idea that this will save the employee time. Maybe it saves them 5% of time, 10%. Things that would normally take them 8 hours, maybe only take them 7.5 hours, 7 hours and 20 minutes, 7 hours and 10 minutes. So that's one of the examples from classifying content. Same thing, you can identify potential email policy violations. You can summarize the call and go up against kind of your existing policies and procedures and what's appropriate, identify potential trade violations. So there's classifying content. The next, again, is now summarizing content. Maybe there's been some advisory or servicing call interactions. There's industry investment reports. Can you summarize industry reports? You want to make a loan to Delta Airlines and they want a $2 billion loan? Well, can I summarize all the public information about them? Can I summarize all the research reports about them? Can I summarize all our past interactions with them? And so a banker, instead of having to read 1,000 pages, can read a summary. And then, if you put this in an interactive form in a chatbot, he or she can then ask, okay, well, tell me more about this transaction. Tell me about this history. Tell me about these operations in this geography. And so there's an idea that there's so much content, a human can't read it all, how to help the human have a more streamlined and effective way to get the information he or she needs, whether using a chatbot interface, or there's other interfaces as well, but you could use it in a chatbot interface to help summarize the content, summarize news, summarize research, summarize filing, summarize reg changes. And so this is kind of the second category that you're seeing this. And when you step back and think, okay, what are some of these, right? You can summarize contracts, can summarize newspaper articles, can summarize client calls. And this is what you're seeing in the industry of this summarization. It can summarize maybe your procedures, whatever you want summarized. And you can use it in a chatbot way. You can summarize past trades. And so one of the advantages, it can help quickly process and condense large volumes of content, can effectively identify the most important and relevant information, provide summarization of varying length and size. I want a 20-page summary. I want a 1-page summary. Give me a summary as if I'm in 5th grade. Give me a summary as if I have a PhD. Some tools allow the summary in various languages. There's a lot of benefits there. And so this is, again, goes back to the heart of what I was saying. It's not to replace any person. It's rather to empower the associate. So either to save them time or just help them perform their role better, that they can now have access. Well, they have access, but, they're just not going to get to 1,000 pages, not going to read it realistically, or, 9 out of 100 bankers aren't going to read 1,000 pages. How can you kind of put that summary so it's easier for them to use and more realistic that they're going to use that information? So it empowers the associate by putting more information in a more readily to use way, especially summarizing, internal materials, but it could again be external notes. And the third, we talk about generating content. So you see a lot of banks, and this has been in the news, you can find it yourself, is more and more banks are using GitHub Copilot. Some with pilots with just 50 employees or 1,000 employees, and some even broader. And so what is that? The same thing, the idea of generating content, generating code or suggested code, I guess you can call it. And then the employee, the expert programmer, would look at this and say, okay, yeah, I'll use that. That looks good, or I won't use that. Again, a word of caution is that the output could be wrong, right? The output could not meet your needs. The output could not be the right code for your needs. And so we really want to make sure that all employees at your banks, as they're listening, bring a healthy level of skepticism, a healthy level of like intellectual curiosity, a healthy level of I guess not concern, that's too strong, maybe concern, that maybe this is right, maybe this isn't wrong. Let me take it with a grain of salt. And that the employee could say, okay, I'm going to accept this code or not, or I'm going to take this as an initial draft and I'm going to edit it. And so that's an example of where you see people use GitHub Copilot. Same for creating first drafts of a credit approval memo. A few firms are doing that, where it's an output in the template that the underwriter is looking for, the banker is looking for. And then she can take that template and edit this, drop this, improve this, and almost like treat it like it was written by an intern, but they did the first draft. And so where you're seeing generating content is the idea of creating first drafts of material. And they can generate, highly sophisticated or contextualized content. It can use, the format you want, and so forth. It can create first drafts of marketing materials, first drafts of pitch books, especially in your market space. And so those are the summaries, and I definitely want to take questions in a minute. But I want to talk, and this is kind of risk, and you see this from various large banks, and some have lists of 10, some have lists of 20. This is not designed to be an exhaustive list. This is an example. This is not everything. So these are some of the risks to be mindful. And of course, there are for those on the call that have a model risk background, you'll see, oh, wow, like half of these are on our model risk list, or 2/3 are on my list, or hey, 100% are. But there is heightened regulatory focus in this space, as many of you know. There are many state laws, many national laws. So Brazil has a law. They have 8 laws on AI. China has 3 laws. Thailand has 2 laws. Canada has 1 law. And of course, there's various states. I think there's 20 states that have enacted AI laws. Of course, there's various bills pending. So there's a lot of regulation. There's a lot of questions. In some states, there's more concern on privacy. On others, it's more using it for hiring or firing. For others, it's disclosure. And for others, it's for credit. There's various state laws. And then even the definition of AI is quite diverse, right? So from NIST, you see their definition is different than the Biden executive order, which is different than the EU AI Act, which is different than some of your own firm's definitions. So if we think about the previous slide, those are the uses that you're seeing in the industry. And here are risks that I recommend all of you that are on the call here really think through and say, am I considering these risks? And again, this is not exhaustive. You might have some other risks. But really being mindful of what new and unique risks. And then the final point on this is just being mindful of the complacency risk. You don't want to use this incorrectly. So think about a Google Maps directions that tells you to drive into a lake. You want to say, wait a minute, I'm not going to drive into that lake. Let me have a healthy skepticism. And that can be really hard if you're not a subject matter expert, right? And so it can be very easy to say, this looks reasonable, I'm going to use it. And so just being mindful of that. And what you're seeing from different firms is kind of this Goldilocks approach with AI. We're not just going to rush into it to just say we're doing it. We don't want to have all this, we're not using it because of the hype, but we're not ignoring it. We want to use it where it'll help our employees. You think of, a tool that helps you with programming. You want to measure, does it make the employees happier? Are they more satisfied? You can take a survey of your employees and saying, does using this tool make work more enjoyable or less enjoyable? You can ask them about efficiency. Do you find your work is more efficient? You can ask them about effectiveness. Do you believe this is higher quality? You could even use your quality assurance teams to test and say, okay, look at the code, your QA teams, your QC teams, your code reviewing teams, your testing teams. You say, let's look at this code that was, this 100 examples of code that were made traditionally without any GitHub Copilot or similar tools, and let's look at 100 over here that was assisted. Now you have to be a whole lot of things constant. Maybe the employees are different. Maybe it's a different years of experience, different level of coding, different task, different language. It's not apples to apples, but you can try to set up an apples to apples way to see, does this actually improve quality? Does it make it worse? Does it have no benefit? And it takes me to kind of a last point, which is that there's a lot of cost benefit analysis. Is it really worth use 5 data scientists a full year, plus all this cost in GPUs, plus all this cost of model validation, having to review it, to automate something that one FTE does? Is that really worth it? So you do see a lot of healthy conversations across banks at their leadership level saying, we want to automate things that are worth it, or partially automate things that are worth it. And it's more the partial automation to really give the employees the tools where it's really worth it. We don't want to spend $10 million to automate something or partially automate something that only costs us $500,000. And so that's kind of that final point. And I think with that, I should take some questions, Sri.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jacob. That was very helpful to kind of set the stage. Actually, let's kind of step back a little bit. I mean, let's go back like years when we didn't really have a lot of large language models, and we had traditional machine learning models, and companies were like bring in data scientists to say, okay, let's take our data, structure them, do feature engineering, do training, testing, validation, build our own models, or go and find a company which does like no code, and there's all this discussion on explainability and interpretability and security and finding like issues with models. Now, where have all those discussions gone? Like, I mean, is it integrated into traditional model risk management, or is that like still where we are still figuring out? Because I mean, the frameworks have evolved since then. I mean, we have the framework, we have ISO, we have many other things, but I'm just trying to understand, like, how have large financial institutions kind of started out with like traditional model risk management from statistical modeling, and now these machine learning models came, and I'm kind of still not bringing in LLMs into here. I'm saying like 2 years ago, this was kind of what happened at that point.
Yeah. Right. So just to put in context, from talking with various peers, I would still say there's probably 8 to 9 times more non-generative AI models, predictive AI models in their inventory than their generative AI models. So if a bank has 10 Gen AI models in their inventory, they have 80 or 90, non-generative AI models, AI models that are not generative, in their inventory. And then again, at most firms, AI models are between 15 to 25% of their inventory. So when you think of any large bank, and you think of their inventory, I'll just make the numbers easy, right? It's 1,000 models, right? So most banks, if they have 1,000 models, their AI inventory is between 150 to 250 models. If you're in model risk or you have access to inventory, do double check this, see if that fits in with kind of the industry average, right? If you're thinking of your bank has, 10,000 models, right? So 2,000 should be around AI, should be AI. And then of that 2,000, how many of them are going to be generative? All right, maybe it's 200, maybe it's 220, maybe it's an eighth or a ninth. And if you only have, 100 models, what is this then? You have 15 or 20 AI models, and you have, whatever it might be, 2 generative AI models. So that's the general ratio you're seeing in the industry. So what's happening, to your point? On fraud and money laundering, it's still AI models. It's still machine learning models. You're not really seeing a lot of generative AI. There is one bank I talked to that did a pilot, didn't go so well, related to writing first draft of suspicious activity reports, SAR, right? SAR narrative, with some generative AI. I shouldn't say not go so well. This just wasn't the appetite today. So some firms, you are seeing it in the money laundering space as a template. And they'll say, let's revisit this in 2025. Let's let somebody else go first. We are very interested, but we don't know if that really wants to be the use case today. So you see some conversations around using large language models around first drafts of SARs and some AML, but there aren't too many banks using them today. But I think you have me on a year from today, I think we'll have a lot of examples of banks using large language models in the anti-money laundering space. But I'd say in the fraud and ML space, it's still non-generative in marketing, and anywhere you're trying to take a lot of data and find that pattern, you're still seeing a significant use of ML. So ML is still very important. It's seeing it's used for appropriate purposes, especially in the financial crime space, especially in the trade surveillance space. I think that's probably, I would say, where the fastest growth of machine learning models have been in the last 12 months. Financial crime, fraud, money laundering, and trade surveillance is probably the fastest place you've seen machine learning models grow. So that's still going on. And large language models, again, you're really seeing the use to assist employees is really where the biggest use is today.
Interesting, interesting. And coming back to, fast forward 2 years, all the discussion is about generative AI. I mean, it's kind of sucking up all the energy in the ML and the AI space. And everybody wants to, look at the latest and the greatest chat model, notebook LLMs,
Right.
trying to understand, like, okay, so we have all these cool technological prowess and power. What can we do with like business pieces? And you shared like 3 major buckets: classification, summarization, and how do we leverage all these like innovations and make lives easier for employees. Also, potentially in the future, think about like making customers access, chatbots, 24/7 customer service, not having to wait on a phone call for a long time, personalized guidance, et cetera, et cetera. All these are like cool fintech use cases we are hearing. Now, coming back to like looking at this holistically, because I'm kind of seeing in my students, like we have like this really talented like technology folks who build integrations and deploy them, and on the other hand, you have these very sophisticated and algorithmically thinking folks who are thinking about like workflows and thinking about algorithmic innovations which could potentially happen. I'm seeing like, how is your organization catering to those kinds of groups, if you will? Is IT growing? Is data science teams growing? Is model risk management growing? And what kind of skill sets are you seeing people with different backgrounds coming in? And where is like the hiring happening within your organization?
Right. Okay, so first on the question of and I'll talk not about my organization, I'll just kind of talk about the large banks overall. Right. So one is on the hiring. I don't think you're seeing rapid hiring, and for those, some of my friends are on the job market, they'll attest to that. They'll say, where'd all the jobs go? So there is, most firms are backfilling open roles in the data science and the AI space. I don't think you're seeing many firms going from a staff of 100 to let's go to 200 today. Maybe if they have to because of some outside influence from various parties make them too. But generally, so there is hiring, but most of it's kind of backfilling. There could be some, moderate increase in headcount. And so on the topic of where the hiring is, again, it's, when I talk with some leaders, I'll talk with someone, she's in the line of business back at PNC in Pittsburgh, where I used to work years ago. And, their point was that they bring this healthy skepticism, but a practicality to using this tool and say, this is a tool, we don't want to use a bazooka to kill a fly. We don't want to overdo it. We don't want to build a spaceship to get a vehicle to go to the supermarket. We want to make sure we're not applying a technology because it's an exciting technology. We really want to use the simplest technology to get the job done. And so I do think from the line of business, they've been, from various leaders I've spoken with, they bring this, I think, a healthy approach of saying, if this tool is useful, great, we'll use it. If it's not useful, we won't use it. And okay, I've seen some examples in, someone will say, in my private life where I've used ChatGPT to plan my vacation to Spain and say, I'm going to be in Spain for 10 days. I have a budget of $5,000 for the whole trip. I'm going with my spouse and no kids. Please make me that vacation. They'll say, and then after I use it, say, oh, maybe I could use this at home. Or maybe they made some sort of picture, or they made a video with it, or saying, okay, use this at home. But now maybe could we use this at work? And so I think where you're getting some interest is executives who are playing around with various large language models, with Notebook LLM, with various products from Google, from products from OpenAI, from different solutions from Anthropic, and they're saying, oh, could I use this in my workplace? But they're also aware of how they've had errors when they've tried to use it in their own space. So they say, can this apply? And if it can't apply, let's not force it. And then when I see these conversations at the executive level, when a pilot is brought, saying, is this worth it? We have to spend all this on GPUs. We have to spend all this on talent. Is it really worth it? And so to the point about hiring, well, am I going to hire all these associates? But where's the benefit? Where's the cost benefit analysis? And so I see a healthy cost benefit analysis saying, maybe we don't want to be the first firm in the space. We don't want to be the last. So if there's the, 10 large banks, maybe we'll be number like 4, in terms of rolling something out. And so I think there's that. When you then interview associates for roles, I think there's the associates that do the best from interviews, the ones I've been part of and others, are those that are, I think moderate might be the best word to use. They'd say, I have this degree from Georgia Tech and, master's in quantitative and computational finance. I want to use my tech skills, but I want to use them appropriately where there's a need, right? If a logistic regression model is fine, great, let's keep a logistic regression model. If the machine learning model can't outperform the logistic regression, fine. If it can, great, we'll build it as a challenger. And so I've seen the candidates that bring that modesty or humility that say, maybe it'll be better, maybe it won't, as opposed to the candidates that say, oh, machine learning models are always better, we're definitely going to use them. I think some of those associates or candidates might struggle. That's what I've been impressed with. Obviously, in the news, you hear this hype where you're like, oh, Sub Copilot's going to save 90% of programming time. But then when you talk with programmers that use it in a banking environment, I'm not talking about working at Netflix where they might have had a 30% savings. Something takes 10 hours, now takes them 7. But in banking, where you're seeing maybe a 10 to 20% savings, that's a little different than what you might hear in the news where it sounds like an 80 or 90% savings. But no, this thing that took us 1,000 hours now takes us 850 hours. Okay, that makes sense. And so you're seeing, I think the results are positive and accretive and matter, but they might not match exactly what you hear on the news.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm kind of hearing something similar too. I mean, there's this openness to adoption, but also with that, healthy skepticism, if you will, on making sure
Right.
that it works for the use cases which could potentially be used. So we have a couple of questions, actually a lot of questions coming in. So I'm going to try and bucket a couple of questions into one bucket so that we don't kind of, go back to every question kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So let me look at, I think there are a couple of questions on metrics. So, for classification, I'm just, call out a couple of them. For classifying and summarizing use cases, what kind of metrics do you assess, especially when you're looking at like cost-benefit analysis? And then there is also another question kind of related to it, what are, for text generation use cases, what are the metrics that can measure the performance accurately?
Yeah.
The question, both of them related to like, how do you track the functionality and benefits of these applications, but also looking at from the angle of cost-benefit analysis.
Yeah. So for the internal models, right, these ones that are used to assist employees, we think of employee starts with letter E. There's the 3 E's on the metrics, the 3 E's. So one is effective, the other one's efficient, and the other one's engagement. And so you would measure those. So think of an example tool that's helping the associate. It's summarizing a call for them. It's writing a first draft of a memo for them. It's summarizing or creating a chat bot against all your corpus of knowledge at your bank, against all your procedures, and the employee can type a question, am I allowed to fly on the weekend if I'm traveling for work? Am I allowed to go to first class? How do I change my password? Or a customer called in, they're a Canadian citizen, they want a US mortgage. Am I allowed to do that? Is there a dollar limit? Whatever the question is. So we want to step back and say ahead of time, we want to set up our ongoing monitoring plan, right? What thresholds, what metrics are you going to care about? Similar to, when you have your car, you want to have some sort of thresholds like, all right, do I want to drive at a certain speed, or do I want to drive a certain level of quality for my brakes or my engine? And you have check engine lights, you have check brake lights, you have something that blinks when you're out of gasoline, you have something hopefully that blinks if you're driving too fast, or you just use your eyes and you see, oh my God, I'm at 100. You want various metrics to let you know if your model's performing within your appetite. So your appetite to drive on a highway at 65 miles an hour might be 80, and mine might be 90. Not that I'm right or wrong, we have maybe different risk profiles. So any firm has to first come up and say, what is our appetite here? And then within setting up that appetite, I think measuring these 3 things, and there's some other things to measure, but the big 3 would be, one is the employee engagement. Do you enjoy using this tool? If the employees majority hate it, and this is a qualitative survey, you would give them, you have to really factor that in. Is this making their life harder? Is this making it worse? And from like an operational excellence point of view, you don't want to make your employees' experience worse. So you want to take a survey, not just anecdotal evidence, but a survey where they can give both, a number scale 1 to 10, but they can also have comments on where this helps them and where it doesn't. Oh, it's been really useful for Python, but not for R. Or it's been really useful for converting code from SAS to Python, but it's actually been pretty bad when I tried to convert it from SAS to R. I'm just making examples. So the first E is engagement. The other one is efficiency. Is it quicker? How long did this take before? How long does it take? And there you can have qualitative and quantitative. You have a project, if you've kept track of the hours historically and said, okay, this project took the whole team all overall 10,000 hours across these 3 months. Now we're giving a very similar project to a similar level of skilled people, not identical, but let's see how long does it take. Does it take 12,000 hours? Does it take 10,000? Does it take 7,000 hours? So you can kind of have that quantitative. And then you have the employee's qualitative assessment. Do you feel like it took you longer, right? You can't really use the numbers maybe because they were multitasking. They were on 2 projects or on 3 projects. Someone was on jury duty at the same time, like whatever. Like you have to, take the data with a big spoonful of salt. But qualitative, do you feel like it saved you time? So the second metric is on the efficiency. And the third is effectiveness. And there you can use your testing teams, your QC teams to say, look at the code before, look at the code after. Or let's look at the credit approval memo that was drafted by the model. And then let's look at it drafted by the human. Again, in all these cases, you want the results going to the human with this expert knowledge who can edit and improve it. So I think those are the 3 E's. Additionally, you could add a 4th E, which is ethics, right? Does this perform well and across our various employee base? Maybe the model doesn't work in Spanish, and for customers that are calling in Spanish, maybe the summary doesn't work well. Again, this is not my bank, this is another example from another bank. If the summaries don't work well for Spanish-speaking customers or for customers where English is a second language, does that mean the customer gets worse experience, better experience? Better because now they're transferred to a more senior employee who can handle them and assist them and be there for them? Or is it a worse experience? So then you have that kind of 4th E of ethics. Is this tool, working better or worse for the various communities in which we serve? And there's various ways to measure that and think through that. So I'd say those are some areas. In terms of cost benefit analysis, to the point, if something only makes people, if it doesn't make employees much happier, it saves them only 1 minute a day, and it's only 1% more effective, is it really worth spending millions of dollars to implement this thing? And so there's always that trade-off of, do you implement something if it's really gonna, I never bought a Roomba because when I went to my friend's house, I was like, to help you, doesn't really save much time on vacuuming. I just vacuum myself. You really have to make any of those trade-offs of any technology. Is it really worth it? I don't have one. I just vacuum myself. I don't think it saves me much time. Considering the cost, it saves me, 5% of the time. So I don't do it. Even though I've used them in Airbnbs, they're not for me. And so I think the same thing, you just have to make that trade-off. And of course, from the dollar point of view, you can do it as well. If you're going to, something that took 10 employees and now only takes 9 employees, didn't lay anybody off, 2 people quit, you backfilled 1. Okay, that took, how much do those people make? All right, it saved me $80,000. Wait, am I going to use 5 data scientists that each make X dollars to build something that's only going to save 1? Is that really worth it? So they're also, you think, from the dollar point of view.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that's something I emphasize a lot in my classes too, just because, a lot of, hobbyists and, with a citizen data science mentality, you want to build something cool, right? I mean, then
That's right.
it's just because of the novelty and like the coolness aspect of it. But then you always need to ask about the business value and how much does it cost?
Right.
To answer that question, if I am feeding in a 400-page manual and sending 64,000 tokens for that to OpenAI, and what does that cost me? And how much will each tech support call cost? And all the fun stuff which we are kind of observing. Let me switch gears a little bit. I mean, there is also the framework, right? The governance aspect. There are a couple of questions associated with it. Now, I'm going to try and bucket them into one of the challenges, the reason why I mentioned 2 years ago when you had the model, the data science workflow. So you had a data science team having a whole, this data engineering, taking care of data governance principles, and then there's the model risk, model monitoring, observability, making sure that there aren't any drifts and other aspects to it, continuous monitoring, making sure that the model is healthy, model is transparent, model is fair, all of those metrics to make sure that you have the whole thing. Now, how has that paradigm changed when it comes down to like Gen AI applications, because you may or may not even have the model in your control if you're leveraging a hosted model. Right? But then last week, Agus, was talking primarily on the RAG architecture, where you're building a lot of
Right,
frameworks. And I presume you are also, kind of, seeing those kinds of play between this is technology, this is interaction with models, but where is the model? You don't even have control of the model, right?
right, right.
So what aspects of it are like tech assets, wherein you are just, adding more to the portfolio of technology for management and security and all the other stuff? What aspects
Right.
is model risk? And where do you have the control, and how is the organization and the governance framework changing to factor those aspects?
Right. No, beautiful question. So even beyond, let's just go beyond generative AI or even AI, more and more shares of banks' model inventories are vendor models, and so you're in a spot where you inherently don't have access to the functional form of the model. It's difficult to challenge the conceptual soundness. So again, even for just a traditional, logistic regression model, the vendor provides us a score, you have to lean more into other things such as ongoing monitoring and saying, is this predictive? If the model's trying to predict, if the customer goes 30 days past due or 60 days past due, whatever it is, well, I can't maybe access the functional form, but I can do some sort of testing. I can do, various reject inferencing. I can do back testing. I do benchmarking and so forth. So the same spirit applies, that you really need to be creative in the space and not just say, oh, SR 11.7 doesn't apply. The regulators will tell you SR 11.7 definitely applies, even more than ever. And so I think the thinking is that you have to step back and say, this is our model risk management program. This is our policy. This is our procedures. These are the model development procedures development teams have written. To step back and say, we have new types of models. What does that mean for us? What does that mean for third-party risk management? What does that mean for the procurement team? Do they have to be more active? What does that mean for technology? What does that mean for technology risk management? Are there some things model risk does that maybe now technology risk should do? Are there things model risk does that now maybe legal should do? Are there things that model risk does that vendor risk management should do? Are there things model risk does that data privacy team should do? If you don't have a data privacy, should you create a data privacy team? Is this something that, where you step back and say, well, 10 years ago, only 2% of our technology applications were called models. 5 years ago, 5% of the applications are called models. And, 1 year ago, 10%. But now, today, 20% of our technology is called models. And by next year, it could be 50%. And within next year, it could be the year after, it could be 70%. So then you have to step back and say, well, model risk is separate and distinct from kind of the technology world. Made sense when only a small share of technology applications were labeled models. But now that so many technology applications are labeled models, and I think what you've seen in the industry, especially in the last, I'd say, 2 years, has been in the cybersecurity space, where models designed to detect and stop nefarious actors. As more and more of those use machine learning, not generative AI, but use various types of AI, you're stepping back and saying, well, where does model risk add value? We're not just going to test it because, oh, model risk has to, because some tests that work for consumer credit underwriting models don't work for cybersecurity models. They don't work for market risk models. They don't work for wholesale models. They may not work for marketing or anti-money laundering models. So you really have to step back from a model risk point of view and say, from a governance, from a risk management point of view, what are we trying to solve for? And then, what tests, or what do we have to solve for? Fairness, privacy, accountability, workforce impact, reputation risk, explainability, reproducibility, human oversight, algorithmic transparency, so on and so forth. All right, well then, which parties are the ones that should do that? Okay, well, we think legal should test this, model risk should test that, and operational risk should test this. Okay, then let's make sure our policies are harmonized and they're consistent, and we do a lot of training to saying, okay, legal is going to test this, reputation risk is going to be tested by here, and that you're not just saying, oh, well, this is our policy, let's fix it. And then to those on the call that are model owners or model developers, even if it's a vendor model, but you're listed as a model developer, think of creative solutions and talk with your MRM team and saying, you asked us to do test A, B, and C. For our models, we can only do C. We can't actually do test A and B. But I thought of a new test X and test Y, which is similar to test A. I'm going to do that. And that, in a way, is compensating and mitigating control for the tests I can't do. I know you want me to do this. I can't see the functional form. The vendor won't tell me. The vendor won't even tell me this. The vendor won't even tell me that. But if we don't do this, we take on this much risk, credit risk or market risk or cybersecurity risk, whatever it is, and we take on that much model risk. So let's figure out a solution. So there, I think, where the model development teams themselves can be proactive, not just say, oh, we'll see what model risk gives us, but give us a finding and then we'll have to figure how to put some sort of plan together. No, be proactive in saying, I care about the risks in my area. I care about the model risk, the operational risk, the credit risk. Well, a lot of these don't have credit risk. I care about the operational risk. I care about the model risk. I care about privacy and so forth. Let me be proactive and think through risks, because all of us own risks, first line, second line, third line. And so I think that's where you're seeing it. In short, you're seeing technology playing a larger and larger role, because more and more technology applications are called models. You're seeing legal play a larger role. You're seeing operational risk play a larger role. You're paying first line procurement, having to learn about the model. What does that mean? And you're negotiating, okay, who keeps the data? Can we get some of that data to train it? How can we back test this? Can we, does the vendor have to provide you data? What does that mean? Training data or the operational data? Does the vendor have to provide you the functional form? Does the vendor have to tell you when they update the model? Can they tell you one day before? Is that okay? Or they have to tell you a month before so you can do some testing, or MRM can do testing? Do you have to approve the update or not approve the update? You want to get ahead of all these things. And so procurement and legal are going to be more important than ever in this space. Well, I shouldn't say than ever, but I'll just say they're going to be very important in this world we're in now. So short answer, you need to really kind of talk through this stuff creatively with your colleagues.
Absolutely, absolutely. And there's a lot of ongoing discussion happening, and I just thought we the time. So in many of the topics which are in the question forum, we'll try and get answers to you, but it's an ongoing discussion. I mean, I wish we had like a guide, SR 11.7 document for Gen AI and machine learning models. Right. This is exactly what we're going to do. But what I am advising my customers and what we are building into our curriculum is to ensure that you come with that perspective that this is an evolving field. And we may not have something concrete. And in addition to comply, in addition to just basically have that framework which everybody is using, we still need to do our own due diligence, and we need to kind of build in the mechanisms even before we adhere to someone else's principles. But I want to end with one fun question. Okay, so I mean, you've been playing around. You've been spending $5,000 going to Spain and like planning your vacations. ChatGPT. To be very honest, I actually did my Tour du Mont Blanc last month. It was an 11-day hike. Spain, Italy, France, and Switzerland. And the first thing I did last year when I was planning was put in like the dates after I finished my teaching and some dates before the next semester started, and then asked for an itinerary, asked for where I should be staying, and ChatGPT was the first thing which gave me the confidence to say, I too can do it sitting here in Boston.
Yes.
But let me finish with this for a fun question. 5 years down the lane, Jacob Kosoff is sitting in his office, okay, with all the tools which you can kind of, see in your crystal ball, with all the chatbots and all the large language models and potentially agents and potentially, quantum computing and I don't know, you pick your favorite evolution of technology. What will Jacob be doing for the whole day?
So I don't think there'll be a shortage of work. So I think one that'll keep us busy is the approach to the growth of agents. So 5 years from now, many people, when they go to apply for a mortgage, aren't going to go online and look at rates. They'll have an agent, a tool, a model, a robot, if you will, that will then apply for all these loans for them or shop around these loans for them, apply for the mortgage and have it for them. Or if they have deposits, they don't have to go around looking around the different banks on who has the best rates. It'll automatically move that for you. Or if you want to go buy an airplane ticket, I'll just write into my agent, or we'll probably speak into my agent. I want to fly to Pittsburgh for a wedding, January 1st, boom, comes back and bought the ticket. That's the cheapest, and it's learned my preferences. And so I think the risk management around that, What do you do when the agent fails? What happens when the agent is corrupted? So we're moving people's money and they never gave authorization, their agent's been hacked. I think that risk management. But I do think from a benefit point of view from the hours, I think hopefully people are working less evenings and less weekends. You know, if it really does, you know, something that would take 100 hours to code or only needs 80, only needs 70, it does free up time. Also, you know, I was reading birth rates in the US are lower, so maybe some of this will help solve some of the labor shortage that might come up due to falling birth rates in the US. So who knows? I don't. Short answer: I don't know the future. Can't predict the future. If I would, I don't know. I might be in a different field. I cannot predict the future. But the things that I think about are the agents, and I think about the risks from that. And then I do think hopefully it will make some people's jobs more enjoyable, and hopefully people have a little bit more free time.
Perfect. Yeah, I mean, like it looks like Jacob is reading the 4-hour workday and the 4-day work week, preparing for the coming agentic revolution.
It could be a thing.
Absolutely.
You know, I know this is recorded, so in 2029, if we're in the 4-day work week, maybe.
The fear I have is when I plan my vacation and I plan for like, here's $5,000, I want to spend a vacation in Spain. My agent tells me, don't worry, I took the vacation and I did the whole thing. You don't even need to go.
There you go. Exactly.
But anyways, this was
parental.
very you know, the discussion was very entertaining and also very, very impactful. And thank you for sharing your immense knowledge and your experience, Jacob. It's always a pleasure. And we will catch up, you know, or a one-on-one call to discuss more later. But you know, one thing I wanted to kind of, you know, let you know, the agentic architectures, as you mentioned, is extremely important. And I was sharing some of the work I did 20 years ago. I did graduate research on agentic systems 20 years ago. And the paper I wrote in the Journal of Manufacturing, I was sharing it with some of my interns and saying, look at this paper. It was 20 years ago. We could not implement this, but today we have the technology to write like a few lines of Python code to basically do this. So if you're interested in knowing more about AI and agentic architectures, the next week's workshop on Friday would be the place to go. Again, if you're interested for an invite, please send us an email to info@qsandbox.com. Slides, which Jacob shared, and also some of the slides I shared, will be available to all the people who registered for the webinar. And next week, we will see you in person in Boston or over Zoom. Jacob, this is absolute pleasure for me to host you again, and looking forward to all the cool things you're going to be building, and we'll catch up soon online.
Great. Thank you, Sri. Really appreciate it.
Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you again in next week. Take care. Bye-bye.